July 31st, 2024. As international mediators work hard to convince Israel and Hamas to agree a ceasefire in an effort to slow the war in Gaza and free hostages, Israel has other plans in mind. While it engages in these diplomatic efforts, Israel is also working behind the scenes on new targets for the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF. Those targets are Fouad Shukur, a senior Hezbollah commander, and Ismail Haniyeh, who many believe is the top dog in Hamas. Within hours, both men will be dead. Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran, meaning Israel has crossed a major line by sending operatives into Iran to achieve its military objectives. As for Shukur, he was killed in the Lebanese city of Beirut. Israel has officially shown it's unafraid of entering other countries to achieve its goals. All attempts to defuse the powder keg in the Middle East are sent into turmoil, with Iran vowing vengeance for the attack on its soil as Lebanon edges closer to declaring war on Israel. Hamas is also likely to pull out of the ceasefire negotiations with Israel, which are currently being mediated by the US, Qatar, and Egypt, as the main link is now gone. That's according to a senior Egyptian official who said Haniyeh was the main link with Hamas leaders inside Gaza and with other Palestinian factions. With that link gone, Hamas is likely to intensify its fighting against Israel. Of course, Israel will respond in kind, with the obvious question being, how could mediation succeed when one side assassinates the leader of the other? The answer is that it can't. That's because Israel has no real interest in mediation, instead being intent on exerting even greater pressure on the militarized Islamic factions against which it's fought for so long. Only now, it's not just Hamas and Gaza that Israel will have to fight. The country also stands on the precipice of war with Lebanon, which leads us to the question that we aim to answer in this video. Who would win if Israel and Lebanon go to war? In truth, Israel has been preparing for this war long before it assassinated a Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. In June 2024, Al Jazeera reported that Israel had approved plans for an offensive in Lebanon that would target Hezbollah, with those claims coming in the wake of Hezbollah releasing threatening drone footage that indicated it was preparing for an attack on Israel. The 9 minutes of footage captured by the drone were of Haifa, an Israeli port city, and were filmed during the daytime. Both military and civilian areas were shown in the footage, including a set of Israeli missile defense batteries and a weapons manufacturing plant. The message being delivered was simple. Hezbollah has the ability to get drones into Israel and, if it wants, could attack at any point. Israel Katz, the Israeli foreign minister, took to X to decry the posting of the video. It's here where he verged on the edge of making an all-out declaration of war against Hezbollah and, by extension, Lebanon when he said, "We are very close to the moment of decision to change the rules against Hezbollah and Lebanon. In an all-out war, Hezbollah will be destroyed and Lebanon severely hit." Only a short time later, word came from the head of Northern Command in Israel, Ori Gordon, that he had approved the plan to launch a ground assault from Israel's northern border and into Lebanon. That full assault hasn't come yet. But fighting has raged on the border between Israel and Lebanon ever since the October 7, 2023 attacks on Israel by Hamas, with both sides experiencing casualties. The Al Jazeera report says that Hezbollah boasts of having completed 2,100 military operations in Israel since those attacks, all in support of Palestine. And Israel's responses have led to over 400 people being killed in Lebanon, with deaths including journalists and paramedics. Israel has also been hit hard, though it can only attribute 25 deaths to Hezbollah fighters. Displacements are also rife. 60,000 Israelis living in the country's north have been forced to leave their homes, as have 90,000 Lebanese. Escalation upon escalation. Now Israel and Lebanon are at a crisis point. On August 5, 2024, the BBC reported that several nations are encouraging their citizens to leave Lebanon, both because war seems imminent and because Iran is vowing severe retaliation for the Israeli assassination on its territory. Hezbollah will play a major role in that retaliation, the BBC says, which will likely lead to the powder keg finally igniting and war officially breaking out. So what would that war look like? Our first port of call is a direct comparison between Israel's and Lebanon's militaries. For that, we turn to Global Firepower, or GFP. Each year, GFP creates rankings of the world's top 145 military nations, assessing each based on 60 factors to provide an idea of the strength of their armies, navies, and air forces. In almost every instance, the IDF comes out on top when compared to Lebanon's military, the Lebanese Armed Forces, or LAF. Starting with manpower, Israel is a slightly larger country than Lebanon, with 9.043 million people compared to Lebanon's 5.331 million. That larger population results in Israel having 126,607 people reaching military age annually versus Lebanon's 69,306. An important point given Israel has mandatory military conscription and is thus training and can potentially call upon more people than Lebanon. Switching focus to active forces, Israel has an active military of 170,000, which is about 110,000 more than the 60,000 who serve in Lebanon's military. It has far more reservists, 465,000 to Lebanon's 35,000, due to its conscription rules. The only area in which Lebanon comes out on top is paramilitary forces, which are fighters that are not official parts of the country, but often act in their country's interests, even though they operate independently. Lebanon has 65,000 compared to Israel's 35,000, a statistic that becomes even more important when you realize Hezbollah is counted among those paramilitary forces. More on that later. As for now, Israel has a clear manpower advantage, and that advantage extends to air power, with Israel easily outmatching Lebanon when it comes to total aircraft in its fleet, 612 to Lebanon's 81. Worse yet for Lebanon, it counts 0 fighter jets among those 81 aircraft, meaning it will have little defense if Israel decides to deploy its 241 fighter jets, which include F-4 Phantom IIs, F-16 Fighting Falcons, F-15 Eagles, and an impressive 39 F-35 Lightning multi-role strike fighters. Israel also has more dedicated attack aircraft, 39 to Lebanon's 9, and is the only one of the two countries to have aerial transports with 12. Lebanon's only real aerial threat comes from its 69 helicopters, which could easily be shot down by Israel's fighters. Israel even has tankers, aircraft that are used to refuel others while in the sky, meaning it could extend the time its fighter jets spend over the skies of Lebanon so they can conduct more complex aerial operations. Those tankers would also see little threat from Lebanon, given that they can fly above anti-air defenses and won't be threatened by Lebanese fighters. Another major victory for Israel. On the ground, Israel again showcases itself as a powerhouse compared to the LAF. It has 1,370 tanks to Lebanon's 204, along with almost 10 times the number of armored vehicles. Israel also has 566 more self-propelled artillery and 120 more mobile rocket projectors, with Lebanon only coming out on top with towed artillery, which requires vehicles to move it into position. Lebanon has 374 of these artillery units compared to Israel's 300. As for naval power, neither country is especially impressive. Despite having a coast on the Mediterranean Sea, Lebanon only maintains a navy of 69 ships, all of which are patrol vessels. Though Israel's navy is smaller in terms of fleet numbers, 67 to Lebanon's 69, it has 5 submarines and 7 corvettes, meaning its navy has a greater tonnage and would thus likely overpower Lebanon's patrol vessels if they were to fight directly. Israel also has a coast extending out to the Mediterranean, meaning it's possible that it will use its stronger ships both to destroy Lebanon's patrol vessels and to conduct strikes on Lebanon from the water. The Sa'ar-class 6 corvette, of which Israel has 4, would be the main attacking threat here. Each of those corvettes carries 40 Barak 8 surface-to-air missiles, which could be used to take out Lebanese helicopters or potentially strike drones if they venture out to the Mediterranean. The Barak 8 can also target cruise missiles, minimizing Lebanon's ability to counter the Israeli threat from the land. The ship also carries 16 anti-ship missiles, which can include the RGM-84 Harpoon, RBS-15 Mark III, and Gabriel, which they would likely use to destroy Lebanese patrol vessels. This naval attacking power could prove vital if Israel decides to invade Lebanon from the country's coast, as they could clear the way for Israel to start landing troops on Lebanon's 139.8-mile coast. It's here where Lebanon's only real advantage might come into play: the Lebanon Mountains. This 150-mile-long mountain range runs practically parallel to Lebanon's Mediterranean coastline, with the northern section of these mountains representing the biggest barrier, as they can achieve an average of 7,000 feet above sea level, highlighted by Kurnat as-Sorda and its 10,131-foot peak. Move into the western flanks of the range and the average peak height drops to between 5,000 and 6,000 feet, with the range's southern section being even shorter, though also containing the 900-foot deep Nar al-Litani Gorge. The Lebanon Mountains offer protection to the country's northeast territory, which includes the cities of Hamel and Baalbek, with Lebanon also benefiting from sharing its eastern border with Syria, a mostly friendly nation. Unfortunately for Lebanon, the country isn't set up to take advantage of the Lebanon Mountains from a military perspective. Most of its major cities, including Tripoli, Tyre, and Sidon, lie on its Mediterranean coast, making them clear targets for naval attacks. Perhaps the LAF would withdraw behind the Lebanon Mountains if Israel invaded, potentially using them to conduct a guerrilla style of mountain warfare, but they would have to abandon key cities to implement that strategy. Where does all of this leave us so far? No matter which way you look at it, the IDF has a clear military advantage over the LAF. It has more soldiers in its active forces, as well as hundreds of thousands more reservists, and has a much stronger air force. The mere presence of fighter jets for Israel means that it should be able to achieve aerial dominance in a war with Lebanon. Israel also has a navy that, though a touch smaller in terms of number of assets, packs much more firepower and could open the way to an invasion via the Mediterranean coast, as soldiers also pour on the ground through Lebanon's southern border. Lebanon can't even take advantage of its mountainous geography. All of its major cities are coastal, so the LAF can't exactly hide behind the Lebanon mountains. An easy win for Israel, right? Not necessarily, as we have to come back to something that sparked the potential for war in the first place: the Hezbollah issue. As discussed earlier in the video, Hezbollah has conducted thousands of strikes against Israel in support of Palestine since October 2023. But in terms of how the group aligns with Lebanon's government and the LAF, the water's become a little murky. Hezbollah itself is a Shia Muslim organization that was established in the early 1980s by Iran. At that time, its purpose was simple: oppose Israel. The group was a response to Israel occupying much of southern Lebanon at a time when Lebanon was mired in civil war, though it has evolved into far more than a militant force. Beginning in 1992, representatives of Hezbollah started entering national elections, leading it to becoming as much of a political group as it is a military one. As of 2022, Hezbollah and the various groups that align with its beliefs held 62 of the Lebanese parliament's 128 seats. A relatively small number of those seats, 13, belong to Hezbollah itself, with a further 14 going to the Amal movement. Though this is a Shiite Muslim party, the Amal movement holds close ties to Hezbollah, as well as Syria, a long-time ally of Hezbollah itself. Beyond that, 17 seats are held by smaller Hezbollah-aligned parties such as the Armenian Tashnag and the Ba'ath parties, along with several being held by individuals who support Hezbollah in some form or another. Finally, there's the Free Patriotic Movement, or FPR, which actually has Maronite Christian roots, though it aligned with Hezbollah within Lebanon's parliament in 2005. FPR's leader, Ismail Haniyeh, became Lebanon's president in 2016, thanks in large part to Hezbollah's backing, though he vacated the role in 2022. Since then, Lebanon has found itself without a president, as its parliament continuously fails to elect a new one. Why does all of this matter? It showcases just how deep Hezbollah's influence runs in Lebanon. While the country itself might like to consider itself independent from the attacks being conducted by Hezbollah on Israel, the reality is that Hezbollah is so intertwined in its political system that it may as well be running the country. After all, the group played kingmaker to install Ismail Haniyeh as president in 2016, and it's Hezbollah that's preventing the election of a new president, likely because the political chaos this causes allows the organization to further grow in power. Hezbollah makes up the majority of the Lebanese paramilitary forces mentioned earlier, with the group maintaining thousands of fighters to Lebanon's south, along with an enormous missile arsenal it uses to carry out strikes on Israel. Missile Threat estimates that Hezbollah now has between 130 and 150,000 rockets and missiles in its arsenal, a massive increase on the 15,000 it held during the outbreak of the 2006 Lebanon War. When that war broke out, Hezbollah fired 4,000 missiles and rockets at Israel for just over a month. A full-blown war between Israel and Lebanon would see it fire many more, all coming from South Lebanon and capable of hitting targets all over Israel. Many of Hezbollah's missiles and rockets, including the Falak family, Shanin 1, Fajr 3, Fajr 5, Fatih, and Salal missiles come from Iran, showing just how deeply the ties between Iran and Hezbollah run. There are also Hezbollah's drones to consider. The Alma Research and Education Center estimated that Hezbollah had access to around 2,000 drones in December 2021. That number has likely increased substantially as tensions have risen between Lebanon and Israel, with Iran again being the likely source of Hezbollah's drones. Finally, it's worth pointing out that Hezbollah has at least 20,000 battle-hardened fighters, possibly with thousands more reservists, that it can call upon if a war between Israel and Lebanon breaks out. What does all of this mean for the war? Though Israel presents a massive missile and rocket threat of its own, it has one of the most technologically advanced arsenals in the Middle East, Hezbollah's arsenal is a clear threat. Any ground forces attempting to enter Lebanon from the south would likely be buffeted by Hezbollah missiles and drone strikes, even as Israel's navy helped it to create inroads into the Mediterranean and the major Lebanese cities that sit off its shores. That approach could lead to problems in the future, even if Israel takes Beirut, but we'll get into that in a while. First, there are a couple of complications that could impact the war. Among the most important is that the LAF and Hezbollah are not the same organizations. In fact, as The Intercept points out, Lebanon is a US ally into which the United States has poured billions of dollars in military aid, as well as training tens of thousands of the LAF's troops. That's in addition to US Special Forces maintaining a proxy commando unit in Lebanon for several years. This fact adds an extra twinkle to a war between Lebanon and Israel, as such a war would technically involve two American allies. America's support of the LAF has been intended to serve as a counterweight to the rising influence of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the numbers are staggering. The US has provided over $3 billion in assistance to Lebanon since 2006 to address both economic support and security needs, which has included facilitating $2 billion worth of weapons purchases that include attack helicopters, Hellfire missiles, and armored vehicles. You could even argue that the only reason the LAF would stand a chance against Israel's much larger military is that it's been bolstered by the United States. All of this aid comes in return for Lebanon allowing the US to wage a secret war against Sunni groups, including Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, within Lebanon, says The Intercept. You'll note that Hezbollah isn't among these groups, with the US instead preferring to strengthen the LAF as its way of combating the rise of Israel's enemy. Therein lies a problem. For all of its US funding, the LAF does practically nothing to challenge Hezbollah inside Lebanon. Part of this is due to Hezbollah operating as a legitimate political party with elected officials within the country. But the larger reason why the LAF and Hezbollah aren't at loggerheads, despite both wanting to play a role in determining Lebanon's fate, lies in the simple fact that neither group wants to plunge Lebanon into a civil war. Enter Israel. During its war with Palestine, Israel has repeatedly shown that it's willing to accept civilian casualties, if not outright target civilians, in its efforts to kill Hamas fighters. We saw this in December 2023 and January 2024 strikes in Rafah, which Amnesty International claims killed 95 civilians, about half of whom were children, in a region that was supposed to be safe from Israeli attacks. Throughout 2023, even before Hamas's October strikes, Israel killed 493 Palestinians and injured a further 12,500, carrying out strikes against Hamas groups in Nablus and Jenin. Israel also targeted Lebanon on October 16, 2023. Following Hezbollah firing rockets at Israel, the country responded by striking Daria, a town in southern Lebanon, with white phosphorus shells. Though not technically banned in warfare, white phosphorus is only supposed to be used to create smoke screens and for similar indirect purposes. Israel, according to Amnesty International, used it as a weapon in a series of strikes that killed 120 people in Lebanon, including 7 journalists, among whom was Issam Abdallah, who wrote for Reuters. The point here is that Israel could be the catalyst for the LAF and Hezbollah to work together. If they see that Israel is willing to conduct wide-ranging strikes, targeting civilians accidentally or otherwise in the process, the two divergent military factions in Lebanon could come together to fight a common foe. That would be a major problem for Israel in a war against Lebanon. It's possible that the LAF would aim to defend Lebanon's coastlines, impeding Israel's attempt to take Beirut and Lebanon's other coastal cities, all while Hezbollah fights on the ground in the south, while buffeting Israel with rocket, missile, and drone strikes. If that were to happen, the conflict would become a lot bloodier for Israel. Still, even with those forces combined, Israel should be strong enough to win. Its active forces outnumber the combined LAF and Hezbollah forces by several tens of thousands, and it has a lot more military equipment to bring to bear. The alternative is that Israel works alongside the LAF, which would require Lebanon's military to directly fight against a political party that has elected officials in the country's parliament, which would give rise to accusations of Israel attempting to stage a coup. Either way, the relationship between the LAF and Hezbollah creates complications that Israel will have to consider when mounting an invasion. This is not the only complication. There's also the subject of alliances to consider. The role the US might play in a war between Israel and Lebanon is uncertain. As discussed earlier, both countries are American allies, perhaps to varying degrees, which means the ideal situation for the US is that they don't go to war. Assuming the war happens, it's likely that Israel wouldn't be able to rely on the US to directly support it in a fight against Lebanon, even though that fight would be geared toward taking out Hezbollah. Instead, the US is likely to try to mediate a ceasefire, much as it's trying to do between Israel and Palestine, because it would want to prevent violence that could create further troubles in the Middle East. That wouldn't be a problem for Israel if it was fighting Lebanon alone. A one-on-one fight should result in an Israeli victory based on sheer military power alone, even when combining the forces of the LAF and Hezbollah. The problem for Israel comes from the fact that Hezbollah has many allies that might be willing to fight alongside it. Syria is one of those allies. With a military containing 170,000 active personnel, along with 50,000 reservists, Syria would be able to bolster Lebanon's numbers substantially in a war against Israel. It would also be able to provide an air force with 271 assets, including 101 fighters, to bring Lebanon into near parity with Israel on the aerial front. Granted, it won't be able to offer much on the naval front beyond patrol vessels and a handful of mine warfare ships that could potentially make Lebanon's coast more dangerous for Israeli ships, but it would still be a very powerful ally. It's also an ally that Israel has a history of attacking. In April 2024, Al Jazeera reported on Israel launching a pair of deadly attacks on Syria within a week of one another. Both involved Israeli fighter jets firing missiles at the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria's capital, with the strikes resulting in the deaths of several prominent officials. These are just the latest in what the news outlet calls a decade's worth of strikes against Syria, which aim to take advantage of Syria's vulnerable state upon the outbreak of civil war in 2011. Now the country is ruled by Bashar al-Assad, who Al Jazeera claims is being propped up by both Iran and Russia, meaning it will be able to put up more of a fight against Israel than it has in the past. Israel understands the threat that Assad and Syria pose. A couple of weeks after conducting its strikes in Damascus, the Times of Israel reported on an anonymous Western diplomat who claimed the strikes were part of a warning Israel sent to Assad. The Israelis clearly warned Assad that if Syria was used against them, they would destroy his regime, claimed the diplomat. Whether that's actually the case or not, it's easy to argue that Syria would have a case for going to war with Israel based on the strikes conducted in its territory, and it's very likely that such a war would see it cooperate heavily with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Then there's Iran. The links between Hezbollah and Iran are clear. Iran founded the organization in the 1980s and has continued to supply it with weapons, including missiles and rockets, ever since. To many, Hezbollah is little more than a proxy that Iran uses to exert its influence over other nations in the Middle East, as well as to conduct attacks on Israel without being directly blamed for those strikes. It's also a powerful military nation in its own right. Global Firepower ranks Iran as 14th out of 145 nations in its annual rankings, noting that its active military of 610,000 people is far larger than Israel's. It also has 350,000 reservists and 220,000 paramilitary fighters, meaning the country's military is more than powerful enough to assist Lebanon while continuing to defend itself. Iran's air force is strong, as it has 358 aircraft, including 121 fighters. It also has a powerful navy that includes 7 frigates, 3 corvettes, and 19 submarines. Granted, it's likely only the latter could impact a war between Lebanon and Israel, assuming Iran can get its subs into the Mediterranean, but that navy still represents a clear threat. Collectively, this is a threat that Israel may have to face. On August 5, 2024, Al Jazeera quoted several sources that claim US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had warned several world leaders that Hezbollah and Iran may attack Israel within the next 48 hours. The sources said Blinken stressed that the US believes Iran and Hezbollah will both retaliate, likely referring to Israel's assassination of Fouad Shukur and Ismail Haniyeh. We're still within that period during scripting of this video, but the warning is stark. Iran is willing to support Hezbollah in Lebanon directly. If Iran does dedicate its military might to the defense of Lebanon and is bolstered by Syria, Israel will suddenly face a military force that could far overpower its own. This is all while fighting a war against Hamas in Palestine. Herein lies a problem for Israel. Going to war with Lebanon means it commits itself to fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against Hamas in Palestine and the other against Hezbollah in Lebanon. It also risks turning the LAF against it, adding Lebanon's military to its list of enemies. But most worryingly of all, Israel entering Lebanon could be all of the reason that Syria and Iran need to join Lebanon in fighting against Israel. That situation would create wars on 4 fronts, with both Syria and Iran being more than capable of resisting Israel in terms of pure military might, leading to Israel stretching itself too thin due to its Middle East exploits. Worst of all for Israel, it may not be able to rely on the US, its greatest ally, for support if this wider war occurs. It's far more likely that the US would try to mediate rather than join the fight. But let's assume that doesn't happen and Israel only has to fight against Lebanon during the war. Even then, it finds itself in a difficult situation. Israel should easily defeat Lebanon, aided heavily by most of the country's major cities being accessible via the Mediterranean. But even if Israel wins in the short term, it could then face years, if not decades, of insurgent attacks from within Lebanon that constantly challenge its control over the country. After all, that's precisely what happened to the United States in Afghanistan. Following 20 years of conflict, the Taliban retook control of Afghanistan in August 2021, helped in no small part by the US evacuating its troops from the country. Could the same happen to Israel if it takes Lebanon? After all, Hezbollah's fighters won't roll over even if the LAF falls, meaning they, backed by Syria and Iran, could continue conducting guerrilla-style strikes against Israel long after Lebanon falls. It all potentially adds up to a lose-lose situation for Israel. Either it fights Lebanon alone, leading to a fairly straightforward victory, possibly followed by many years of dealing with Hezbollah fighters within Lebanon, or the war against Lebanon triggers Syria and Iran to enter the conflict, placing Israel on the back foot, creating a situation where the US has to choose whether to support its ally or try to mediate for peace. But what do you think? Can Israel defeat Lebanon in a war that doesn't cause a ton of complications in the Middle East in the future? What role do you think Syria and Iran will play in this conflict? Share your thoughts with us, and thank you for watching the video.